He saw his men cut down around him, helpless to come to their aid, helpless to stop the onslaught of star-sent demons. They had descended with a fury equal, if not greater, to that of mankind. A fury stoked in sidereal flames, an alien ire towards all things human and civilized. These demons, with their obsidian-black multiform antlers and forehead-set eyes, with their loathsome visages of rampart, cross-species and mixture, had come from far-off and unmapped places. In their journey through the spaces between the stars, they had harrowed countless civilizations, incorporating the weakest of the defeated stock into their brood, fortifying themselves abominably. They stained the very soil of Earth with their footfalls, not merely corrupting the land but poisoning it, burning it away as they trampled across plains and forests. While mankind had often been at odds with nature and had truly defiled it at times, it had never once been so inimical to the Earth. These foul, monstrous creatures from beyond were biologically and spiritually incompatible with the flora of the planet. The fauna fled at their approach. Entire ecosystems were destabilized or even effaced by the mere presence of the lamentable invaders. And he could do nothing but watch as his species, the dominant beings of the planet, fell before the talons and blades of these Hadean things. Combat was useless. The horrors swept through cities and towns as a long-forgotten pestilence swept through prehistoric villages. Whether engage on land or in the air, at sea or below ground, the result was always the same. Humanity, while intellectually superior, was outmatched by the dim-witted tenacity of the invaders. The latter fought without exhaustion, with exponentially greater numbers. Tactics were irrelevant. They needed strategy when they could simply swarm and overwhelm any force posed against them. As the inhuman foot soldiers sipped their putrid soups from the skulls of vanquished men, and stretched the flesh of the slain over themselves as blankets against the cold winds, he watched with a gloom-sunken heart from afar. He had never before witnessed such bleakness, such widespread ruin, and wept even for those he had despised in earlier times, for they had at least been people, born of the earth, and not the hateful thralls or bastard offspring of ultra-mundane devils. On what might have otherwise been the final day of man's existence, he looked to the stars and prayed for an act of providence, for any imperial intervention at all. Whether or not his prayers were answered, or if the subsequent events were born of luck, this chronicler of man will never know. But as those fiends dined on man-carrion and blanketed themselves beneath tarps of skin, a change overcame their surroundings. Before, during the initial siege, the animal kingdom at large had fled wholesale from the invaders. To the trees they had climbed, to the higher atmospheres they had flown, even knowing only breathless doom awaited them. Deep into the soil they had burrowed, and to crushing depths they swam. Mankind, they had told themselves, had earned the fate which now befell them. Humanity, they reasoned, could fend for itself, and if not, would be justly eradicated, just as that bipedal species had eradicated so many below it in the Great Chain. But the animals, hiding in their holes, peeking through fathoms towards the surface beyond, and glancing down from the chilling heights of the upper atmosphere, saw that these new creatures, these dominators of men, were far worse. Where man at his harshest was slaughtered for sport, these new beings not only slew for enjoyment, but with incorrigible malice. Cruelty beyond measure was implemented in the murder of the furred, feathered, and scaled. Butchery is not an adequate enough term to describe the atrocities committed upon the quadruped, the Ophidan, the winged. The casual heinousness of these dark-hearted barbarians far surpassed the most malicious thoughts of the evilest men. Despite knowing what fate would await many of them, the animals flew, crawled, and galloped to the defense of mankind, not forgetting the cruelty of their old masters but abiding it, if only momentarily, for the destruction of a common enemy. The skies, blackened by crematory fumes, deepened to an even darker gloom as innumerable winged creatures descended upon the reclining hordes. The grounds trembled, no longer from the marches of the wicked, but from the stampedes of those who had once laboured under mankind. Half-sentient growths sprang from the ground, seizing the fat-bellied invaders, strangling them or holding them in place as the poisonous and venomous stung and bit until the ensnared forms were bloated, paralysed and putrescent. The oceans seemed to boil as species known and hitherto unseen breached the surface, daring that irrepressible atmosphere to drag the beach-camped enemy into the lightless, inescapable depths. He watched, amazed, as the world around him came together to capture and torment the opponents of men. The order of the earth had been unsettled. Man, though powerful, had been unseated by a stronger foe, but a foe unfit for terrestrial rule, a foe determined only to destroy and desecrate, with no intentions to rebuild or progress. A few days after the sudden upheaval, the man was approached by a steed. Proud and unsaddled was this horse, and it met the man's gaze without the air of subservience man had come to expect in the lesser beasts. Accompanying the horse was a great pack of wolves. In their mouths they carried a variety of weapons. He accepted these and dispensed them among those of his kind that remained. The horse neighed loudly, the sound echoing into the sky and carried upon the winds. Soon after, other noises arose in response, all born of bestial throats, and a great army amassed at the foot of the hills into which the residuals of mankind had fled. Standing atop the hill, with the proud steed beside him, with his people coming out of the hill-carved caves behind him, he rallied all the species of Earth into a single force, and not long after led the multi-species host into a grand battle against the planetary trespassers.